The 1996 Brit Awards were famous for two specific things. One was, of course, the stage invasion of Michael Jackson's performance by Jarvis Cocker, and my last video was a deep dive into that story and into how Jarvis was actually saved by David Bowie. So if you haven't seen that one yet, the link is in the description, go check it out. The second notable thing, however, was Oasis. They won 3 awards that night, one for the Best British Album, one for the Best British Music Video, and one for Best British Group. Oasis swept the board, and each time they got up to accept any of their 3 awards, they did something particularly memorable or controversial. When they accepted the award for Best Album for What a Story Morning Glory, they ridiculed Blur, their rivals in the Battle of Britpop, singing a piss-take version of Parklife, where Liam sang Shite Life and Noel sang Marmite.
I'd like to thank all the people. All the people, so many people, and they walk your Kenzit hands, and it has through their shite life.
When they accepted the award for Best British Group, Noel openly endorsed Labour MP Tony Blair, who then went on to win the general election and become Prime Minister.
There are 7 people in this room tonight who are giving a little bit of hope to young people in this country. That is me, our kid, Bonehead, Quigsy, Alan White, Alan McGee and Tony Blair. And if you've all got anything about you, you get up there and you shake Tony Blair's hand, man. He's a man.
But when Oasis won the award for Best British Music Video for Wonderwall, it was presented to them by the singer of Australian band INXS, Michael Hutchence. And just before leaving the stage, Noel said this.
Has-beens shouldn't present fucking awards to gonna-bees.
He publicly called Michael Hutchence a has-been, seemingly for no reason. Someone who was being perfectly nice to him, given a complete public humiliation just out of the blue. Since that time, the incident has been rarely discussed by Noel or the band, and following several documentaries about Michael Hutchence, it has become a widely held belief that Noel simply attacked Michael Hutchence for no real reason other than a bit of press attention. Very sadly, Michael Hutchence died the following year. Some people believe it was suicide, some people believe it was just a tragic accident. But the belief has kind of come into the public consciousness that Noel Gallagher was in some way responsible for Michael Hutchence's death. Look at how this paragraph on Wikipedia has been phrased. INXS frontman Michael Hutchence presented the British Video Award to Oasis, whose guitarist Noel Gallagher mocked Hutchence upon receiving the award by sneering, "Has-beens shouldn't give awards to gonna-bees," which, according to musician and producer Danny Saber, upset Hutchence. Hutchence committed suicide later that year. However, as is so often the case, there is far more to this story than initially meets the eye. So today we are going to dig into the past and try to connect the dots to explain why Noel Gallagher said what he said. To begin to tell this story, we need to go back in time several years to the very first time Oasis appeared on TV, the 18th of March 1994, performing their still yet to be released first single, Supersonic. Oasis was still pretty much unknown. Their first single hadn't been released yet, and the nationwide and then worldwide mania had not yet started. But they had just played on TV for the first time, and the show that they were playing on, The Word, had a legendary after party that often ran till 3 in the morning. So they stuck around. And after this particular show, Paula Yates, then wife of Bob Geldof, came along to the after party. 3 months later, in an interview with the NME, Liam made this slightly cryptic statement about Paula Yates. He said to the interviewer that Paula Yates was, at that time, up for a bit of sorting out. It later transpired that what this odd statement meant was that at the after party, Paula Yates, who was married to Bob Geldof at the time, had hit on Liam. She tried to have a fling with him, but Liam had turned her down out of deference to Bob Geldof. However, Paula was still looking for a new relationship of some kind. And around 6 months after she had failed to get together with Liam in February, she interviewed Michael Hutchence in October of 1994 for an early morning show called The Big Breakfast. The interview took place on a bed. Take a look.
We have a guest. Oh, such a fantastic guest. I can't even describe it to you, but you'll see in a second. Boy, this is a guest who has tackle troubling trousers. This is a guest that has everything that a rock star needs to have. Danger, talent, curly hair, and Australian subtlety. And for the first time, this is a guest that I want to have my leg over. And it is. It's the fantastically talented Michael Hutchence.
Hi.
Hi. What are you, a big sex symbol or something? Hi.
The facts are all a little bit murky about when Paula Yates and Michael Hutchence actually got together. It's not clear specifically when that happened, but 4 months after this interview, they went public and Paula Yates left Bob Geldof. So now, let's cut back to where we left the story with Liam Gallagher in 1994. According to Tony McCarroll's book, on the 25th of September 1994, just a few weeks before that Big Breakfast interview, Oasis were in San Francisco. And that night, Patsy Kenzit came to the gig that the band were playing, and she came backstage to meet them. And according to Tony McCarroll, Liam was immediately smitten. Tony says this: "Someone had mentioned that Patsy Kenzit was planning to be at tonight's gig. During the gig, I spotted her. She was stood at the side of the stage. It seemed that every man that passed her became instantly nervous. Tony McCarroll came off stage and started talking to her, and then took her onto the tour bus to meet everyone. She sat in front of us all, facing towards us. We sat mesmerised as we couldn't think of anything decent to say. With an innocent laugh, she then said to Noel, 'Right then, you northern hooligan, shall we see who's capable of partying harder? I don't believe there is a man here that can drink or smoke more.' Funnily enough, it was about as quiet as I'd ever heard Liam. Who'd have thought his future wife was sat here trying to get his brother's attention?" So, right about the same time that Michael Hutchence and Paula Yates were having an affair and getting together back in England, Liam Gallagher was in America and he had just met Patsy Kenzit. He obviously had strong feelings for her because they ended up getting married. The next thing to happen was that Patsy Kenzit said in the press that if she had been a teenage girl, a poster of Liam would have been on her wall. So Liam read this, Liam was aware of it, and it obviously gave him some hope. Now let's scroll things forwards a year. Michael Hutchence and Paula Yates are still together. It's now the 23rd of November 1995 at the European MTV Music Awards. And guess who is presenting an award with Michael Hutchence? Patsy Kenzit. This is Patsy Kenzit, who Liam has now started to fall in love with, and who has also been kind of flirting back with Liam through the press.
So Michael Hutchence and Patsy Casting.
The Breakthrough Award recognises new acts who have made the biggest impact in the music world this year.
And it's great to see, of course, MTV supporting, encouraging young bands, young artists.
And so there was a potentially very, very tense situation here. And it was set alight by a photograph that was released of Patsy Kenzit at that event next to a smiling Michael Hutchence with one of her hands down his trousers. So Liam, for the second time, was now stuck in a weird love triangle thing with Michael Hutchence. And you can appreciate he probably did not have a very high opinion of Michael Hutchence by this point. Liam had turned down Paula Yates out of deference to Bob Geldof, Michael Hutchence had done the total opposite. And now, here was Michael Hutchence still in that relationship with Paula Yates, cheating on her with the woman that Liam was in love with. So you can imagine, despite the total hypocrisy of it, because Liam himself was an absolutely inveterate womanizer, he still had a very, very low opinion of Michael Hutchence. And, as it happened, Liam was at the 1995 MTV European Music Awards, and his jealousy and dislike of Michael Hutchence boiled over backstage into a scrap. The details of exactly what happened are a little bit hazy, but the general consensus seems to be that Liam threatened him with a fire extinguisher and invited him for a fight. In an interview for The Telegraph, Liam was asked directly about that confrontation, but in true Liam style, instead of disclosing personal information about what was going on in his private life, he gave a kind of daft smokescreen answer, which is a technique he's used many times down through the years to avoid having to answer an uncomfortably direct question. The interviewer said to him, "What about the time at the MTV European Music Awards where you threatened Michael Hutchence with a fire extinguisher and later with a fist fight?" Liam helpfully replied, "It was all the Weetabix I ate as a kid." According to Patsy Kenzit's autobiography, Liam's charms did win in the end, and a month later, in December of 1995, her and Liam became an item. However, the ongoing tension between Michael Hutchence and Liam Gallagher did not go away. Following their confrontation at the MTV Music Awards, Michael Hutchence apparently continued to insult Liam and to goad him in the press. Now, unfortunately, I haven't been able to find the original articles in which Michael Hutchence insulted Oasis because, sadly, INXS historical stuff is nowhere near as well documented as all the Oasis stuff is. However, Noel refers to those insults in an interview with Uncut magazine here. Noel says, "The second night of the Brits, we didn't know Michael Hutchence was going to present us with an award. It was the first award of the night, and there'd been words said before the ceremony in the papers. So, when he came out to present the award, we went, right, the Brits organisers have stitched us up here because they know what's going on. It wasn't scripted or anything like that. We probably wouldn't have done anything if Michael Hutchence hadn't come out and said his little bit in the papers." So, there was in fact a pretty significant kind of negative history between Liam Gallagher and Michael Hutchence going into the Brits. And the organisers knew about it, set the whole thing up to try and provoke some kind of reaction. Now, in the past, when I've watched the first thing Liam says when he gets up on stage, I thought it was just a bit of nonsensical Liam rambling, but it isn't. Listen to what he says.
Well, for one, right here, Michael's going to give me a slap right in the face, so come on.
So Liam said, "I heard Michael wants to give me a slap round the face, so come on then." That was a response to the threats that Michael Hutchence had been making in the press. However, I think it was all just hot air. If you look at Michael Hutchence's body language on stage when Oasis come up, he's clearly trying to make nice, he's clearly trying to communicate, we're all buds, I don't want to cause any trouble. And it seems like Liam accepts the peace offering. He can't be bothered to take it any further, he gives him a hug, and that seems to be it. According to Paolo Hewitt, however, Noel, who is definitely the less forgiving of the two brothers, had taken ecstasy that night, so he wasn't entirely with it. And so Noel, a man who doesn't tend to easily forgive and forget, was not impressed by Michael Hutchence's actions. He wasn't impressed by what Michael Hutchence had been saying in the press about Liam. And so, hyped up on ecstasy, decided to tell him exactly what he thought of him.
Has-beens shouldn't present fucking awards to gonna-bees.
So, hopefully, with all that background information, it kind of makes a little bit more sense. What Noel said wasn't just some absolutely savage, brutal smackdown in public, just out of nowhere. It was a response to an ongoing slagging match that had been going on for several months in the press that both Liam and Michael Hutchence had been using, just like many bands did in that time, to get more press exposure. What Noel said was actually him standing up for his brother. And when you see it in that light, you kind of go, oh, okay, it's not nice, but it kind of makes a little bit more sense. Now, there are reports all over the internet that apparently backstage at the Brits afterwards, Hutchence and Liam got into another fight in which Hutchence launched a fire extinguisher at Liam's head. However, I've not been able to find any source or confirmation that that happened whatsoever. I think that is just a mangled version of what happened the previous November at the MTV Awards. And so, just to underscore that what Noel said was really just one entry in an ongoing tit-for-tat saga between Oasis and INXS, Michael Hutchence carried it on after the Brits. On the INXS single Elegantly Wasted, he even went into the studio and secretly overdubbed a second set of backing vocals singing I'm Better Than Oasis. So, now that we've examined the context and the lead-up to Noel's comments at the Brits, let's look at what happened next. Let's briefly cover what happened to Michael Hutchence and hopefully show that his tragic death, for whatever reason, was nothing to do with Noel Gallagher or Oasis. Michael Hutchence and Paula Yates, now a public item, had a baby together, and that baby was called, I kid you not, Heavenly Hirani Tiger Lily Hutchence. Following her split with Bob Geldof, Paula Yates now had custody of their 3 children. This is how the Irish Independent tells what happened next. Police had investigated claims that opium had been found at the London home shared by Yates and Hutchence. It was said that her nanny had tipped off the newspapers to the presence of drugs in the house and around the 4 children, and the papers had, in turn, alerted the police. A close friend of Paula Yates called to collect her daughter from the house and found the assembled children playing with waxy brown sticks that had been packed into Smarties tubes and delivered by courier. A further search of the house unearthed yellow powder they took to be ketamine. There was also cocaine and charred foil that may have been used for smoking heroin. Further, they discovered a hoard of Polaroids, apparently left where the children could find them, of Yates and Hutchence in latex suits and in a variety of sexual situations using various extreme S&M sex toys. In the face of this, it is hardly surprising that in the year of Michael Hutchence's death, Bob Geldof continued to battle Paula Yates for custody of their daughters. Paula Yates wanted to bring her children, including Michael Hutchence's daughter, out to meet Michael Hutchence. However, because there was so much drug taking going on, Bob Geldof, quite rightly, wanting to protect the children, blocked that trip from happening. Michael Hutchence, however, who was still heavily using at the time, rang Bob Geldof and there was a big angry exchange over the phone. Shortly afterwards, Hutchence was found dead, surrounded by drugs. He had alcohol, cocaine and Prozac in his system. It was a tragic, horrible, drug-fueled death, but it was born out of his issues at the time. It was nothing to do with a tabloid scrap with Oasis a year and a half previously. So for me, having dug into this story a little bit deeper, I've come to the personal opinion that Michael Hutchence's death was nothing to do with Noel Gallagher, was nothing to do with Oasis. In fact, I don't think it was anything to do with any one person. I think it was drugs. When it came to the band feud between INXS and Oasis, both sides gave as good as they got, and both sides genuinely did use it just to get in the papers, to get a little bit of free promo. And while what Noel Gallagher said clearly did upset Michael Hutchence, what Michael Hutchence said clearly upset Oasis as well. It was tit for tat, both sides gave exactly as good as they got. To this day, Bob Geldof himself doesn't believe that Michael Hutchence actually committed suicide. He believes, just like Paula Yates said repeatedly while she was still alive, that Michael Hutchence's death was a tragic accident. When it comes to talking about Hutchence, to defending himself, or really making any comment whatsoever on what happened, Noel has mostly been uncharacteristically quiet. It's so easy to jump to judgment on people when you read little snippets of these stories, but it always amazes me how much context you can add when you do a little bit of digging. In 2019, in an interview with Variety, Noel summed up what he actually thought about INXS when he ranked them alongside David Bowie, U2, New Order and the Smiths, saying just these three words: INXS were great,